Okay. So
Yeah.
we'll kick it off here in a second.
Cool.
All righty. Well, welcome everybody. Jeremy Williford, podcast number 8. Thank you so much for joining us today. Super excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me,
Yeah.
John. I'm excited about it.
People are tired of hearing from us all the time, so we need to bring in some guests, John. Like you and I are running out of stuff to talk about. So thank God we had someone from the industry say
I see,
yes.
I see you guys on my feed all the time. You'll do a fantastic job. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to live up to the banter you guys usually have.
Oh, no way, Jeremy. You're going to do amazing. And this is going to be so much fun. Like, of all the people that we could have on, you were by far at the top of that list because, we've known each other for a little over a year and a half now. It's been so much fun working with you. And I think there's a lot of cool things. We have so much fun just talking in general about stuff outside of AI too. So it's really great to have you here and talk about a lot of cool things.
I'm excited about it. Let's get going.
Awesome. So just to kick it off, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your origin story. Like, how'd you get to where you are? You're doing some really amazing and exciting things at NVIDIA, but there's a lot behind the curtain in terms of Jeremy Williford that I think people would be interested in knowing beyond your career. So how'd you get to where you are today?
That's fantastic. Thanks for asking. Hey, listen, I was super fortunate in my journey. I came out of college as an electrical engineer. I went to Texas A&M, and it was a fantastic experience. It was funny because I worked at Motorola most of that time as a co-op every other semester. I was back and forth between work and school. And I always tell people my third senior year was by far my best because the reality is it took a long time to go down that journey. But at Motorola, I recognized very quickly, although I loved technology, I loved what Double E gave to me. I also realized I absolutely sucked at being an engineer. Being in a cube and being kind of combined and doing work. And I was fortunate enough that last semester I worked at Motorola. Um, I'd been there over a year, and whenever they had like this appreciation for the engineering staff, so the sales guys all took the engineering staff out, and we sat in a suite at a baseball game. And I looked around the room. I'm like, are you kidding me? I could be doing that job and use the technical degree I have. Oh, that's all. That's what I'm doing in life. So I made that conscious decision literally on that single night that I wanted to be a part of sales and part of what ecosystem development really looked like. And at the time, we were doing paging infrastructure, and I was like, I don't think that's the way to go. I think semiconductors are going to, be the next big thing. So I went out, and as I graduated, I recognized that, Intel, AMD, they had these college training programs where they would take engineers and teach them how to be sales guys. And I'm like, perfect. So I was fortunate enough to land a job at AMD, lived out in Silicon Valley for a while, and then lived in Boston for a while. And after living in Boston for a while, I'm like, oh, I'm a Texas kid. I'd rather be at home. And so I took the risk of joining a rep firm that had about 7 lines of business, Intel being one of them, digital equipment, all kinds of people. One small company called NVIDIA. And NVIDIA at the time had no salespeople, zero. And they said, hey, can you come back to Austin? Can you work out of Texas? I was like, that's my company. So I went back, and the great thing, I started as a rep for NVIDIA, and I had the Compaq as my main account. A fantastic account, it was right there in my backyard. And they were one of the biggest computer manufacturers in the world. NVIDIA at the time, we were one of 40 VGA controllers in the market. In fact, we'd almost gone out of business. We were the first 2 products we did, highly unsuccessful. As Jensen said, I could sell 200,000 of anything. He did. And that's all we sold. And we really couldn't make a way in that VGA controller market because we had a very specific code structure and how to go after it. And we were trying to go after console business. It just wasn't working out. So I was able to work with, we worked with NVIDIA, and NVIDIA said, okay, now we need to go into standards. We need to really think about what Microsoft's building in their DX layer. And we need to write all of our code to that DX layer. And we need to think differently. We need to have one base construct for our silicon that all the software speaks to. And in that journey and in that thing, NVIDIA finally figured out on their third product in my first year with them in 1998. And we just exploded because we hit one design win there. And that one design win at Compaq followed by the one design win at Dell. That gave our company just enough momentum, just enough, recurring revenue to come in to eventually go public the next year and to start the journey. So that's how I started with NVIDIA, and that's where I wound up where I was. And it was a perfect timing on everything, because literally whenever I started in 98, our company, I would do presentations showing that our company had 60 people. And we thought that was a big number, 60 people to service your business, Compaq. And we would demonstrate, how we were going to dedicate all these people to what they were doing at Compaq or Dell to make sure they were successful. And that was the origin of my start with NVIDIA and how we started as a startup company.
That's really cool. We see it, I mean, it's plastered all over the news and in the stock market and the trade journals about all of this amazing success that NVIDIA's had, $3 trillion approximately market cap, depending on when you're looking at it.
It's crazy.
But that's, now. But, to hear you talk about 1998 and just the change and the evolution that's gone on, it's incredible, right? And so, the first thing that I'm curious to hear about is, like, there's a lot of change probably that you went through as well from a personal and a learning standpoint through those years. What do you think is the thing that would be like one of those salient points in those early couple years with NVIDIA that you realized either about yourself or about just the world in general, and how that fits into the world of business and technology?
Oh, that's a great question. Whenever you're working for a startup, as you well know, you wear every hat in the building. There is nothing that you're not responsible for. I tell people all the time, listen, getting a master's is great. It's a great education form. A better education form, work for a startup. And in that startup, I remember, I vividly remember one call. Everybody who was in operations and sales in the entire company, so half our company, 30 people on the line. And we're talking about, the numbers and what the forecast is versus whatever we're talking about. And we were talking about manufacturing of the parts to get them there. And one of the senior leaders, who is still a dear friend of mine, still at the company, I am certain is worth billions of dollars, but you wouldn't ever be able to tell because he just loves what he does. I told him, I said, well, I don't think that's my job, because he asked me something. I'm like, I'm not really sure. That's not really my job. And he goes, no, that is not true. Everything is your job. Your job is to know how the company is constructed and how it works and what we're doing. And not only is that, your job is to fix it and to make sure that things get operationally better. And that's what I have loved about this company. It has never changed. I still feel like every day I walk into this office that it is a startup. And we are thinking about ecosystem development. We're thinking about what it takes to grow this company. And as a growth company, Jensen is a genius and masterful being able to talk about growth factors in the market and what we need to do to lift this growth. It is never about, we never, as he says, we never watch the scoreboard. The scoreboard is what we saw in our earnings and results last week. That's the scoreboard. But the reality is you're always playing the game. And the game is to get to the next level. It's to demonstrate value to more people, to more developers. And that's what our company at NVIDIA has always been about. And even whenever we were a VGA controller company, the idea and mindset was, how do we reach more developers? How do we get more game developers? How do we get more, people who want compute constructs? And if you think about our journey as NVIDIA, the reality is on our 4th generation product, we built the first, what we call GPU, this first programmable accelerator processor. And this was going to allow game developers to really write code to everything we did in the gaming sector. And it revolutionized PC gaming. It really took it to a brand new level. You look at PC gaming today is 5 times the size of the entertainment field, right? I mean, the movie field. It's grown out of this culture of giving developers the tools they needed to construct the environments they wanted to make all these incredible visualizations that you see. And so we were able to use that for the first, 10 years of our company. But then starting in the, kind of the midway sector, we had all this programmability, and Jensen made the masterful decision, we need to make this open source to everyone so that people could take advantage of the power of parallel processing. To that point, everybody had been using serial processing. Everybody was x86 developer. And he put a massive amount of technology into each chip we sold, and it drug our margins down for, I don't know, almost a decade. It really pulled down our margins because it was expensive to put all this logic into one chip. And the reality was not that many people were using it at the time. But he knew that at some point, Moore's law with x86 and the amount of production you got out of an x86 would eventually come to an end whenever the process geometry kind of slowed down, whenever the power went too high and you didn't get any more performance. And that's exactly where we are today. It was an unbelievable risk, an unbelievable prediction. You asked me a simple question of what I saw in the first 2 years. That's what I saw, but that's how it played out. And looking back on it now, it is amazing to me to see where we are as a company, where we are, as a world thought leader. And it all goes back to those first principles that were installed early in our company's history of the most important thing is ecosystem development. It is how you design a structure that everyone can build upon. And that's the greatest thing I've ever experienced at this company.
Jeremy, as you were talking, I was thinking, I mean, you're kind of part of a Cinderella story now. I mean, like you can't go anywhere and not hear the word NVIDIA. I mean, and with AI, I mean, it's obviously you guys.
At least they say it right. For most of my career, it's been NVIDIA. They had no idea how to say it. So
well, it took me like 5 months to sell John's company. I'm still learning it. He's training me. But as I think about it, by the way, I didn't realize how small it was when you joined. You joined a startup. You picked wisely, my friend. But in your genesis, the first decade, you said you kind of knew what the game plan was, and then the playbook changed. All right, be honest. I mean, Jensen's not going to see this, but if he does, just be careful. When did you know? Did you know, like, what are we doing? We're pivoting. Did the whole company totally were they bought in, or did y'all have to? Do you have to take y'all on a journey a little bit?
Yeah, I think Ethan, you very astute kind of commentary and question because there was a lot of mindset in the company, in those early years of, and let's, CUDA was our programming language.
Yeah.
And we hired this brilliant guy named Ian Buck from Stanford. He had been writing this code structure in the Stanford, in his Stanford dorm room called Brook. And Brook was the first language to really take advantage of this parallel processing. And so we hired him and we decided, okay, we're going to build a layer that allows us to, do parallel programming algorithms. And that layer was super costly, as I was saying, right? So it really pulled down our margins. And the reality was we had a lot of people inside the company saying, hey, why are we focused on this? Our mission is to build the best gaming platform available. And these are really not helping us. I mean, there was some talk, but being a founder-led company, the great thing about that is if you have strong leadership at the helm of that company, and you know this as well, right? Working for Dell and in the history, John, your family's had with Dell, having a founder-led company, even if you're making decisions that feel like, well, I can't really see the benefit of this in a 5-year period, you're still going to be on mission. You're still going to be because you have a strong leader that's saying, hey, this is the way the market's going to go. And look, he was branch predicting this stuff the whole time. The whole time he was saying, look, people are going to need accelerated computing. If you're doing visual inspection, this is going to help you. If you're going to do this, and this is before AI. These are before the big bang of AI in 2012. And so all of that being said, he was branch predicting all of these kind of, and maybe not the full generative AI structure, but he was definitely showcasing how important parallel processing was going to be. And look, he made all these investments at the same time. If you looked around in the market, Intel kind of dipped their foot in the toe of with Tejas, back probably about 12, 13 years ago. And after about 3 years, they're like, we don't have the stomach for this. This is not for us. We don't need to. We'll just put in the CPU. We'll just put GPU. I mean, I don't know for how many years I was told, look, NVIDIA, I appreciate what you're doing with discrete graphics. The reality is, though, integrated is just fine. Everyone's using integrated graphics. We don't need you. And I was told that by executives for close to a decade, and all around the market. And the reality was, we kept saying to ourselves, as long as we can demonstrate real value to the end user and the experience that end user is getting, we will have a value in the market. And so, to your question, when did I, was there always camps that thought we should be doing different directions? Yeah, but we have a founder-led company. The founder's the genius. He's going to go down as, the father of AI probably. He should also be considered one of the fathers of PC gaming. And so having that kind of direction, just like Michael Dell is for Dell, it is transition. It's multi generational that it helps people, and it's always helped me. It's been one of my greatest privileges to work alongside of him.
Well, so Jeremy, I think that they're very lucky to have you too. I think you're an awesome leader, and having the opportunity to work with your team and see how they think of you. I mean, stellar, right? And I love being around you too. One of the questions that I have based on what you were just sharing from a leadership standpoint, like, how do you know when you're making a good decision?
It's a great question. I think that I'm a big fan of making sure that, in fact, one of the mottos in NVIDIA is never lose alone. Okay. And so I'm always a big fan of community within our company. We're a very flat organization. Ethan, to your point, we were 60 whenever I started. We're 30,000 right now. 30,000 is tiny. I mean, for a $100 billion company and a $3 trillion valuation, it's a small company. But one of the metrics that we've used as a company is this never lose alone mentality, which is that you want to bring other people. There's too many incredibly intelligent people around me to make decisions in a vacuum. And I want to make decisions that are beneficial, not only for NVIDIA, really for my partners and our end customers, our enterprise. And it really starts with first principles. What are we doing as a collaborative group to make sure that we're lifting all boats in the market? And what are we doing to try to activate that? And so as a leader at NVIDIA, I'm very mindful about getting subject matter expertise to comment on what our strategies and directions are, and getting that buy-in. And then once we're at that point where we're ready to make that commitment, then we get everyone in the boat rowing the same direction, that this is the choice we've made and here's where we're going. But I rely on leaders all over the place, and not only within my own company, but really commentary from leaders at Dell, from leaders for our primary customers, from all over, to make sure that the directions we're going are well suited. And look, I don't always get consensus on that, and that's fine. In fact, if you don't get consensus, I think that's better, because that way that you understand the obstacles that are in your way. But that's really how I try to operate on a daily basis.
I love that. Leadership is a team sport, and there was a great mentor or friend of mine when I was coming up in Dell said the same thing. I always talked about, you want to get people in the room to make decisions. More brains are better than one, and just to get different perspectives. But he used that line. I don't think he worked at NVIDIA, but he said, Ethan, never lose alone.
Oh yeah.
Never lose alone. You win together, you celebrate wins as a team, and you lose as a team, because you learn more from when you lose than when you win. And that's just
every time.
Love that. And
I do too. I do too. And that's what I love, that founding principle. You hardly ever learn anything whenever you're winning. Whenever you're winning, you're like, look at all the great work I did. Man, you start losing, all of a sudden you become a sponge. And so I'm big on making sure I activate a culture that says, again, don't watch the scoreboard. Even whenever you're successful, don't watch the scoreboard. What you're trying to figure out is look for the problems that need to be solved. And I do that on a regular basis. In fact, I did that with the team just yesterday morning. And one of the key areas around the market that we're looking at right now is, how to activate enterprise companies with AI. And just like what Iternal does a fantastic job of bridging that knowledge gap in enterprises to allow customers to achieve the AI that they want to set out with. And so that's probably the biggest mission I have right now. And that's, you're not going to find that on IDC or a Gartner report. You're going to have to really go dig deep. And I tell every one of my people, you've got to go work with the customer directly. You want to learn firsthand. You want to fail fast and learn quick and get back on that. And so you can continuously grow that flywheel.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you were giving me a little bit of a hard time before we started recording here, Jeremy, was the fact that I'm in my fancy shirt right now. So I promised that when we started recording, I'd tell you why I'm in my fancy shirt right now, because normally I'm in a t-shirt.
Yeah, I thought I was in some kind of legal review. I was worried about this.
So probably, I think it was the first time we were having dinner, I was telling you about how one of these days we're going to have really amazing video generative AI capabilities, where just as real as I am sitting here in front of the camera, you're going to have a digital human version of me or of you that could be used for executive communications, that's scalable, legally compliant, protects the privacy of the individual while also being, lifelike and human, and somebody that, you could build a digital relationship with, just like you listen to your favorite artists on your iPhone. So one of the things that I'm doing, this is a multi-purpose podcast, because in addition to us recording the podcast, I'm also recording a data set of me right now. So we're going to chop up the clips of me talking. And we've got a partner that we're working with to actually put together it'll be their first fine tune of their really cutting edge digital human video Gen AI model. And so they've graciously agreed to use me as their test subject and guinea pig. And hopefully what's going to happen is we're going to have another John Handy that's going to pop up on the screen one of these times, and I can have a conversation between myself and Ethan and whoever else is on. So,
oh, that's fantastic. I love that training model. I mean, that's a great way to do it too. And I think that is the future state of AI. Listen, I think I heard it the other day, 83% of the world's data structures are on-prem at enterprises. And it's mostly cold storage, and they have all this information, all this data. And just like you just described, they probably have countless numbers of podcasts and other things that they do. Man, taking all those assets and building a rich portfolio of being able to do avatars or customer service engagements, any of these things, it's just such a strong vehicle that is going to be. I mean, we're just at the first starting gates of where this is really going. And so to hear that you're using it in this entire dialogue, and we're going to use this as a training set, that's fantastic. I mean, that's the way companies need to be thinking. And I think that's the mindset shift that is still ongoing right now. I mean, it really is. The art of the possible has to be part of your dialogue if you're a CIO. If you're a CIO, you need to be thinking outside the box. And there's two companies that exist. One company that is going to continue doing turning the crank stuff, and the other company that's going to take over that company, right? And I think, Michael said this publicly. He wants to build the next version of Dell that would be taking over the current version, because just like we saw on the internet, days of the internet, you were either one of two companies. You're either Netflix or you're Blockbuster. Okay, those are the two options you get. And if you're using the technologies you just described, John, you're going to be Netflix. If you're not, it's a slow and it's a long tail, but it's ending. So I don't know. I mean, that's probably too aggressive a statement, but you see amazing things being done with the technology now.
Well, I don't know if it's too aggressive. I see it as being right on point. Like Ethan and I have talked a lot about how eventually one of these days, probably sometime soon, we're going to see the first $1 billion one employee company. Like there are new generative AI coding applications out there that I've played with, that I'm starting to use, and I can build web apps to do very specific things that, as part of my many hats as a small company, growing company leader, that I could have never done before. I would have had to pick up the phone and call one of my engineers and say, hey, I need you to put together this dashboard to create this configuration file so that I can load in some data for this analysis that I want to do. Now I can go to one of these applications, type in a couple things saying, this is the data that I have that I want to put in. This is the structure that I want put out. I want it to export it as a tab separated document so I can load it into Excel. And I want it to give me, you know, the following error messages or something, you know, when it generates it. And I press go, and, you know, 5 minutes later, I get a first draft of it. I maybe have to ask it a couple of questions to have it debug or connect some of the pieces that didn't necessarily get connected at first. But like, I literally just the other day, in a couple of hours, built this really cool statistical analysis thing. Because, you know, we do a lot of hyper-personalized video content from, you know, a vendor standpoint to some of these big companies as a marketing agency. And so this big company, they have 25,000 targeted recipients that they wanted to produce personalized videos for. And obviously, it doesn't make sense, even at, you know, the scale that we're operating at, to produce a single personalized video for every single recipient. You know, it costs too much for the customer, and it takes too long from an output standpoint. So instead, we want to say, well, if we had a scope of 500 videos, what is the best permutation set of, you know, clips to cover personalizing as many recipients as we possibly can within the scope of 500 videos? You know, maybe we have 17 Jeremys and 47 Michaels and 21 Johns, and their titles are, you know, a CIO or a VP of sales or a CMO, right? And they work in the services industry or manufacturing or automotive, right? So all these different permutations. And I did it manually. It took me like 4 hours in a spreadsheet to like do this the first time and figure out how I wanted to do it. But then I said, my team's going to have to do this in the future, right? As we scale this out, as this Gen AI video stuff becomes more popular, we're going to not be producing 25,000 videos. We're going to be producing 25 million videos. And somehow we have to take that content data set and say, let's plug it in. And instead of somebody poking around in a spreadsheet for 4 hours trying to figure out what the best 500 combinations are, we should really have an app that does this. And I could have called up one of my engineers and pulled them off of something else. But, you know, I'm trying to make an active effort to learn more about how to do this AI coding myself, not because I'm trying to make a profession out of it, but so that I can lead a team effectively that can adopt this in the future.
You got to eat your own dog food. I'm a big fan of that.
So I said, I'm going to do this. And so it took me like 6 hours. And at the end of it, I upload the spreadsheet. I upload all the options, you know, the 200 video clip options that we want to supply to the model. Click a button, and it gives you the optimized set of 500 or 1,000 permutations of videos. And I even made it have a donut chart where you can actually see the breakdown of, you know, these were the ones that had 3 elements, and these are the ones that had 2 elements, and these were the generic ones. And of course, clients love that because they can say, oh, we got 94% coverage out of 25,000 names with, you know, these personalized 500
in
videos.
6 hours. And by the way, 6 hours is learning it. I mean, literally, we're talking about 30 for a person who knows what they're doing. Now, 30 minutes worth of work to produce incredible content, and that's blockbuster Netflix. It is that starch of a difference of how much can be done. So it's amazing you were able to pick that up and do that on the fly and understand how to do it. That's incredible value for your customers.
Well, so here's one thing I want to unpack. You mentioned it earlier, Jeremy. So we're a startup. You know, like we wear every hat. Like John does marketing. I want to do some sales. I want to learn the tools to do engineering, because the tool sets that we have access to as a startup is mind blowing. Like you didn't have this even a year ago. Like every 6 months, I feel like there's new tools we can accelerate our capacity as a startup. But now we work with very large legacy enterprises that have a lot of technical, they weren't built over the last 5 or 6 years. They've been around 20, 30, 40 years, some 100 years. We see a lot of them very struggling to really put AI into its workflow, like in its actual use cases. We saw a lot of the marketing, you know, because it's easy, quick hit, but to be transformational, to bring AI into your enterprise, it's not going as fast as a lot of people predicted. So I'm going to throw this over to you. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do with clients? Like, what do you see them? Where do they make mistakes? How do you advise some of the bigger clients on what to do to get some ROI out of this amazing technology?
Yeah, I think you ask a great question, Ethan, and you're seeing the real transactional point of where where the market is right now, right? And it's pivoting to where companies recognize exactly what John just did, which is the power of these tools are amazing, right? But now they have to really operationalize how they're going to institute these tools. For example, at NVIDIA, we have about 70% of our engineers are all software engineers. I mean, we're very much more a software company than we are a hardware company. And people don't recognize that. But if you think about the tools and the libraries, Ethan, you just pointed to, NVIDIA is instrumental in trying to seed the market. John has been fantastic. Iternal has been fantastic about taking a lot of the libraries and the tool structures that we have, not only being able to put them into productization, but also to help us and give us feedback to say, this is what could be better, this is what could be worse. But my point is, at NVIDIA, where we have 70% of our engineers that are software engineers, all of them now utilize a software generative AI that's based on what we build as a company, because our productivity is exponentially faster with these tools than it was without them. And it's not just the tools to develop the code, it's also the tools that go find the bugs and assign bugs to the right people. It knows, given the nature of what we see in this algorithm, that this person is probably best suited to take this. And now, our think of it as an internal call center. It's all being routed to the right people. Man, you cannot buy that type of productivity improvement. There's nothing you can do. You can't. And I love one of the ideas you mentioned was this first single person $1 billion company. If you are a company now and you couldn't afford to bring on 30,000 more employees, your best bet is to go build generative AI structures to help every one of your current employees get 2x the performance that they were currently getting, and doubling the size of your company that way. And so, Ethan, to your question, a lot of companies are struggling. They're in that POC. The proof of performance that they're doing right now is really kind of indicating, okay, where do we spend money? How do we go get these structures built? And coming alongside them and helping them, making sure their data is clean. I mean, if you look at it, Ethan, a lot of customers are struggling right now to make sure they have the right clean data sources, that they're getting the right outputs, that they have the right guardrails in place. They've got to make sure that the guardrails are really mindful of what they're trying to do. And what we're seeing the most of is companies using internal AI right now to learn the structure. If you're doing a proof of concept, you need to be doing a lot of internal work first so you can test it on yourself. So you could eat, I should be saying drink your own wine. Eat your own dog food is not the right one, but drinking your own wine. So you get a feel for how it's used, where you need to improve your model structures, how your prompt tuning is getting better. And between Iternal, but NVIDIA, we give you a ton of tools and structures to help you go do that. The resources is where that really comes in, Ethan. Companies like Iternal coming alongside of our enterprise customers to help them in that journey, because a lot of people don't have the resources internal to their own customer base right now to do this. And I think that a lot of customers would love to keep their data on-prem. They would love to be able to do these things in-house. But right now, a lot of them have to go into the cloud to try to activate this. And that's great. But I think long-term, people are going to build their own data center structures on-prem that allow them to own their own destiny in these things. So we're at that pivotal moment, though, where companies are trying to figure it out. They need help and resources to go do that.
You mentioned the improvements and accelerations and efficiencies within NVIDIA from a software standpoint. There was an interesting article or post that put out by the CEO of Amazon just a couple of days ago. I have it here off to the side because I wanted to talk about this with you. So let me read the quote that they put on X. The average time to upgrade an application to Java 17 plummeted from approximately 50 developer days to just a few hours. We estimate that this has saved us the equivalent of 4,500 developer years of work. In parentheses, yes, that number is crazy, but real. What do you think about that?
Man, doesn't that speak to the value of doing it this way? I mean, look, everyone's looking for return on investment. Return on investment is You can't even calculate it because you couldn't hire this many people to go do that work. And if you were doing that work for 4,500 man years, the reality is you wouldn't be able to do the next thing. So I definitely concur with AWS and what they see and how they do it. And you talked about your model and how you could build it in 6 hours, and you kind of figure. I've told everybody, I'm like, look, in 5 years, I do believe you're going to be able to speak into your phone and say, I need an app that does this for me, and it needs to build these structures for me, and I need to, and I always think about my mom saying this into her phone. I need an app that tells me what it needs to be on my grocery list every day by the things I eat and consume. And then all of a sudden that app would self-appear on that thing. And that could easily be, how this generative AI works because you're going to use natural language to program. And it's one of my sons is a computer scientist, loves the codes and the structures. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, look, it's good to understand this, but at the same time, understand the ecosystem, the environment you're trying to build, because that's where the value is going to be. It's going to be how you use these structures to build environments that self-create in this way, right? And there's always going to be a need for engineering and for programming and for all of the things that we do every day. But the reality is they're going to become such effective tools that common people are going to be able to build them. And so, it's just a new world order. AWS had it right. It's going to be tough to live without it.
You said something that hit the nail on the head. When you say return on investment, you went to school, you were a double E. I was an econ finance person. ROIs change. Like, you can't even quantify it because the world that we live in now, the rule books are being rewritten real time. And another thing that as I think about, and we've talked about on this podcast, and I'll ask you, is the talent pool is we have to train the AI. We also have to train people to know how to use this stuff. And it's kind of being built real time because this stuff is hit. I feel like it's kind of been in the back, in academia, and then all of a sudden, bam, it's been just thrown over the wall in some cases. And it just feels like that overnight. And now corporate America is trying to figure out what to do with it. And there's a lot of challenges in just people that know how to work with this new technology. We don't have enough. So what do you tell your kids? I have children, you have kids. Like, do you become a computer science major? What do we need to do for the next generation? And how would you advise them?
That's a great question. And I think about this a lot because I have 4 kids and 2 of them in college right now. And the reality is, look, I think there's always going to be a need and a desire for people to understand the structures behind what we're building, right? And I think there's going to be a strong movement there. But John and I talk about this all the time. Academia had a thought around AI for a while, and the algorithms necessary and everything, but it was never really taught at a strong level. I think there's even more gap now than ever because this market really only exploded. I mean, I think the public awareness came with ChatGPT and what they launched 2 years ago. But let's be clear, it started, back in 2018, whenever the 2 people kind of worked the algorithms to win this particular contest. My point to all this is academia and where we are in the education system is not anywhere close to where it needs to be because this market just started. We're working with a lot of university structures around the globe to teach more of this stuff so that people understand the commonplace of deep learning and what was required for deep learning and how to go teach this. And then also not only to teach that, but also I work with a bunch of professors that talk about, okay, let's talk about it. We're going to be using prompts as kids start using prompts to do more of their generation. We need to be thinking about this. We need to be talking about prompt education and how we use prompt, and then take those prompts and then take the output of that and make sure that it is effectively communicated. I tell kids all the time, one of the things that you're going to have to get better at, the written word is fantastic, but it is going to be commonplace and everybody's going to have the same written word as far as these generative AIs being able to take it. You're going to have to be able to present your stuff at every possible, and this is live communication. And so if you can't present your ideas, and I tell every engineer, I'm like, look, I don't care how much you enjoy, in an introverted world to be able to work on your own projects. If you can't present that project, it is going to happen in a vacuum. No one is going to see that. So you have to be able to present it. And I speak clearly to all my students I work with. You have got to be able to present ideas, and you have to do that with confidence, and you have to be able to do it in a way, not that you're selling it, but that you are demonstrating the value of what you have. And if you can't do that clearly and articulately in spoken word, you're going to struggle, because everybody's going to be able to do that on paper. Generative AI is going to help everyone do that. I suspect you could build an avatar that could do it for you in a very incredible way, like John's working on. But that power of communication is going to be critical. And I got to tell you, in the youth groups that I see, that's one of the lost arts we have. I mean, it's not as effective as it used to be. So I think that that's got to be regenerated as one of our key attributes for especially people in North America.
That's really interesting. I think that, you're onto something there. You hit it way more precisely than Ethan and I. We talked about something similar a couple episodes ago, which is that I think there's going to be a repatriation of social skills. Over the last probably 15 years, we got these screens put up in front of our faces, right? We've got iPad babies now, and there are now studies coming out talking about how children that have access to iPads starting at 6 months old have significant anger issues compared to their more socialized peers. And it's like, I mean, it's a shock. I don't remember the exact number, but it was like a statistically significant large disparity in social ability. And I think that your articulation of this AI is going to be able to capture an idea and articulate it well on paper, but then the importance is that human connection. And you can have as many digital humans representing you, and I hope to be at a point where I can have like 1,000 versions of me on customer presentations, to scale me. But it's never going to replace that face-to-face conversation or that handshake or looking somebody in the eyes and just being around people that you enjoy being around, whether that's friends or family or anything like that. And so I think that's a really interesting concept that you shared there around the importance of bringing your knowledge and sharing it with other people in a human setting.
Oh man, the connection is going to be so huge. I mean, it's especially with self-generated text and all the self-generation of communication that goes on. And like you said, we have a pretty large population in the youth population that has used text more than they like to interact. And I'm making overgeneralizations. I mean, I don't want to say stay off my lawn, but my point.
It's a trend, Jeremy. Oh, I've seen it too.
Yeah,
it's a real thing. It's okay. We can say it.
Yeah, but at the same time, look, what a great opportunity, because now your value prop is going to be, the ability to be able to communicate and speak effectively and work in community groups to really lift it up. And then we're going to have all these tools that make us more effective, digital communicators. And I think that's going to be great too. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but the shifting of the workspace is definitely a thing, and we're going to see this shift coming over time. And I think universities are going to have to, apply themselves to that too. And you're seeing large investment structures, across the globe. I think Governor Newsom just came out with Jensen 2 weeks ago in California and said, "Hey, we need to uplift our workforce, and one of the ways we're going to do that is we're going to start teaching more of these courses that talk about AI, and they're using a lot of the course loads that NVIDIA has. I'd like to replicate the same thing in the state of Texas here. So, and really make sure that we're focused on, making sure the workers have the skill set they need in this new world economy."
Yeah, you talk about the culture and the social groups. Here's something interesting I want your thoughts on. They're now talking about AIs having their own cultures developed. And there are some researchers that have connected different large language models, like the Claude models, plus like the Llama models and some other things. And they're actually able to interact with each other autonomously.
Interesting. Yeah.
And to the point where like the Llama 3 models like have psychological breakdowns in the group chat. And then one of the other models will actually call in Claude and say, hey, Claude, Llama's having another breakdown. Can you fix it? And then Claude will like put some code in the chat and it will like do things. It's wild stuff. So I preface that with like, I think, what are your thoughts about like, you know, this concept of artificial sentient intelligence, or AGI, artificial general intelligence, and how something like that could create these parallel cultures that exist beside ours, interconnected with ours? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that the example you gave is interesting because it's an adversarial neural network. So adversarial neural networks, and now I love to geek out on this. So adversarial neural networks, actually, it's a way to train neural networks. It's an ability to put them, against each other to be able to learn from each other, and that's another training tool that we see in the market in adversary. And so as you described that, I was thinking to myself, okay, well that's how we do a lot of the trainings for the dialogue of self-awareness for these neural networks, though, in this, in a greater general intelligence kind of structure. That's not really a thing we see. I mean, the reality is, just getting these things to do the things you kind of want them to do, and in a way that is structured and very, telling. There's still, we're continuously working on the models to be able to do that. So the idea of general intelligence, I'm not really sure that we see that in the future, but it's fun to talk about. And the more fun about it is, the art of what's next is crazy. But I will say this: one of the things that we see in the market is we see people that have this mental mindset of, oh, well, this could go off the rails. They could do this. Everyone saw Terminator, and they branch predicted this 40 years ago in Terminator, and so it was like, oh, get it. And I think the general state legislator met this past week, and there's some old school thought that says, oh, this is scary, this is bad. Unfortunately, that's going to just detract from the reality, which is, no, this is the new factory of intelligence production. And that intelligence production is really what's going to catapult us in the next level. And the idea that this would get off the rails, or there's not much validity to that given where we are in the structures. And so that being said, I understand the fun of it, but at the same time, we got a lot of real world problems in front of us that this can help greatly go aside. And I want to continue using the neural networks to make that happen.
I kind of think of it like the internet. There were arguments that could have been made 30 years ago, 1993 to 1998 timeframe, saying,
absolutely,
hey, the internet's this terrible thing. You can get your identity stolen on the internet, and there are justifiable concerns to that, right? There's a lot of bad stuff on the internet even today, but I think that the good drastically outweighs the bad. I mean, the ability to access information to enable a young child who wants to be a doctor one day to be able to simply go onto Google Scholar, type in some medical condition that they heard about on a TV show, and Grey's Anatomy or something like that, right? And read these medical publications and just soak up that knowledge from the comfort of their home, without having to go out or go to a library or try and find somebody to talk to about this stuff, or listen to podcasts with industry experts talking about these things.
Yeah,
I think it's just such an amazing enabler. And kind of like you said, I see the AI stuff being the next evolution of that kind of access to knowledge, where suddenly now you have even more at your fingertips. And as long as the AI can be trusted and validated and secure in an ethical way, you now suddenly have the ability to do just incredible things where your creativity is really the limit to what you can accomplish. I saw a video of an 8-year-old on X who created an app using that same technology I was talking about before as an 8-year-old. And she is like some Harry Potter app that she was like chatting with Harry, was kind of the idea of it. And, like, that's exactly the kind of thing that I would have done at that age, because I made animated movies when I was.
You totally would have. I know.
Yeah,
you would
100%.
have. I know 100%. And watching that little girl, I'm like, that is a 8-year-old John Hamby. I can see that. I know exactly what you're talking about. I would say this: the other thing that we didn't get to, and you guys, I don't want to take too much time, but the other thing, I see coming is, we made some big announcements around Omniverse and what we're doing in digital twins. And if you think about the digital twin market and how integrated it is to, for example, a large factory. If you think about auto manufacturers have to build out tons of new factories, right? Because they all have to build new battery structures. And so these are all brand new factories. And like companies like Mercedes and BMW, they all understand, even Taiwan Semiconductor, who are building semiconductors, they all recognize robotics will be critical to all these factories. And they want to build their entire factory in a digital twin environment so they could train all the robots to work next to the people. Because the thing you can't have is a robot not being people aware. And so you could do all this training and these algorithms similar to exactly what we're doing with generative AI, exactly what you described. But now we're using universal seam descriptor across all these applications to bring all this into one repository and be able to train the next generation of robots and factories to be able to go do these things and to work directly alongside of people. And it's not taking every job. What it's doing is allowing people to, not be at risk for jobs that are hard or, physically laborious, that, we're going to, work people to death. Now we're going to allow them to work in other places that requires human intervention, that requires all this stuff, but we'll be able to make massive progress in productivity outputs of every factory around the world. So there's all kinds of applications that will take place from generative AI that won't even be in speech and text and visual illustrations. They will be in everything that we do. In fact, generative AI is probably the heart behind self-driving vehicles, right? I mean, these are all generative AI type problems where you got training sets and it'll turn into large deployments. So it's exciting to see what it can be, but there's a lot of opportunity in that excitement. And there's also a lot of, as you said, with the internet, there was a lot of risk associated with it. We got to be mindful of these risks, and we got to make sure that we balance the two as we go forward and make sure we give everyone the opportunity to use this and be a part of it, and then try not to leave people behind on this thing.
I love that you made that Terminator comment, because I was going to lead in. I was going to ask about. I'm really excited about the world of robotics and what's going to take place. I'm a tech optimist, but I love Terminator. Like that was a great franchise. In fact, I was watching a podcast over the weekend, AI based, and a company named Cyberdyne exists, believe it or not. And it's a robotics company. And I'm like, that CEO was having fun.
Go wrong? Let's just name it Cyberdyne. Let's just start with that.
But it's awesome. And so one of the things I was going to ask you, maybe you already answered it, if you think about the next, let's forecast 10, 15 years out, just have some fun, engineering mind, you're at the forefront, you're working in one of the biggest companies in the world. What gets you excited about, there's a lot of people that are fearful of AI, but what gets you up out of bed going, this is going to change the world?
I look at the structures we're building around the world. I look at, what countries are doing to build their own large language models, right? And they're in their own dialect. I think, John, your question about, what we're doing with the cultures and stuff. I think there's beautiful things within each country that they're building that helps make their culture thrive around these models, and what they're doing to do deep learning in these sense of, cultural based. I think that's exciting. I love everything we're doing in healthcare and life sciences. If you look at drug discovery, Ethan, we're going to cut down drug discovery, if you look at our FDA process, it is literally years to get drugs out. We're going to cut that down by, one of the biggest, longest poles in that tent is trying to find candidates and putting candidates together with drugs. We're going to cut that exponentially down. Drug discovery, in fact, we made an announcement the other day about a blueprint for drug discovery where we're going to give this away to make sure that every pharmaceutical in the world has the ability to go do rapid drug development. And that's super exciting, because I think there's a lot of benefit for the human species for that, right? There's not a market that this is not touching that's going to completely transform. And to me, waking up every day and being a part of that, being a part of the excitement, being a part of the opportunity to go help companies get there and continue building software structures that allow companies to get there. And, as John said, with, I think that every startup we're dealing with that thinks about markets differently, that thinks about how to use this, will be tremendously successful, just like Iternal has been, right? So I'm excited for that on a daily basis. And I see a lot of people retiring around me, and I'm like, what on earth would you do that's more fun than this? I mean, you're at the market at this huge inflection point. If you could look back 20 years ago and tell people, 25 years ago and tell people, hey, you really want to understand this internet thing. It's super important. It's not going away. It's really going to be a part of everything you do. I think 25 years from now, I would die if I thought I would stop doing this. My golf game is not very good, and I do not think that would be very much fun for me. Yeah, so I love coming to work every day. This is part of being something at this level and working with some of the best minds in the world, right? I mean, people that really have a vision for this stuff. What a tremendous blessing for me and for everyone I get to work with. So I couldn't imagine doing anything else, Ethan.
Awesome.
So in the final minutes here, zooming out of the business and the technology stuff, what advice would you give to young people, say going into high school, going into college, or just entering the workforce? You've raised some incredible kids. I've had the opportunity to meet. I think they're fantastic. I think you're a great dad. What would you share with parents or children themselves who are trying to get ready for this exciting new future that we have, and how to navigate the complexities that we're facing today?
That's a good question. I think the critical thing for kids, and I would say going into high school, because I've got kids that are going into high school. I got a kid in freshman and eighth grader. I've got two in college. So I think about this a lot. I think about, what they need to be doing. Look, I'm looking to launch, and I say successful people into the market. And what I mean by success is, do you have a community of friends? Do you have a structure that you get to go to, that you get to serve at work in a way that you feel like you're contributing to the greater good of what's going on around you? Do you get these vehicles in your life that are fulfilling? And it's not about money, and it's not about accumulation. None of those things. I keep telling these guys, I'm like, none of those things are satisfying as an endpoint. What is satisfying is to be around a community of people that you enjoy, to get to work at a job that you really enjoy doing. And that's not easy, right? That not a lot of people get that. In order to get that, though, and this is what we touched on earlier, you have to continuously build a community, right? You have to build a community around you. You got to know people and get to know people. And I tell people all the time, especially younger people, like, look, go work with people that in your community that want to do, they're doing jobs you want to do. Go ask them, hey, can I shadow you for a day? One of the greatest things that I would love to do is mentor young people. I'd love to help people and go meet with them for coffee and talk to them about what they're doing and what they can be doing. I mean, and I'm willing to take my time to go do that for any kid who's like, hey, I'd like to spend some time with you. And that goes for young people at Dell. It goes for people in college. I do that on a regular basis because people did that for me whenever I was going through this, and it really helped me to craft the way I vision these things. So I would say stay in community, use the community around you to understand better. And then the biggest thing I would give to anyone is become a lifelong learner. Look, the stuff that you're going through in school, super important. Keep doing it to, make sure that you satisfy that portion of, the checkbox mentality of what you did. But that does not end at the education level coming out of college. The reality is at NVIDIA, I rarely want to know where someone went to school or what they did. What I'm more concerned with is, are they a lifelong learner? Are they constantly trying to understand new markets around them, new understandings of how their job's being, and what are they doing to continuously capture those learning moments. And just as we were saying before with startups where you wear every hat in the building, I want people that really are embracing the mission of what we're trying to go do. I want people to understand, hey, I've learned about your company. I want to understand it. This is where I think the market's going. I want to be a part of this. And that's a continuously done effort. I mean, I think both of us, all three of us know people in our industry that didn't get, technical degrees, but are incredible visionaries because they've embraced that on a daily basis to go learn more and become part of that. And that constant thirst for learning really makes a huge difference. And you could tell it. I can tell it whenever I interview people. I can tell it whenever I'm working with people. There's people I work with that are just like ferocious learners. And if you look at all of our CEOs, they've done a fantastic job of continuously, conforming to or building new markets because they've been on a learning path to get there. So those are the advice points I try to give. In my own home, you cannot be a prophet in your own homeland. So it's not always recognized there, but I get people like John to speak into my kids, and that helps tremendously because whenever you have somebody else speaking into your family, it makes a huge difference. That's why I spend time with other people's kids because I want to help them. And sometimes you can't hear from your own parents. So anyway, that's my comments.
It's awesome,
Well
Jeremy.
said. Hey, I have a question for you. In the spirit of lifelong learning, we'll leave the audience with one last recommendation. Books.
Oh,
any good reads that you would recommend to friends, family, children, just kind of like, this is a must read?
My must read right now, and I feel bad about this because this is my must read for all of my friends in my category. All right. So I'm talking to my 40, 50-year-old friends, and right now, Peter Attia's book, Outlive, is fantastic. It is a beautiful commentary on what it takes to have not longevity as far as, how to live longer, but really enjoy the time you have and make sure that the way you think about your own, because look, I see people all the time that do a fantastic job of building wealth from a financial standpoint throughout their entire life, and then literally get to the point where they don't want to work anymore, and they literally have no enjoyment of life because they have not built in that structure that says, here's what longevity really looks like. And it is so much more important for us to have a balanced lifestyle and a really understanding of what it takes physically to be healthy into our later stages. And so as we come up to November and Men's Health Month, Ethan, I talk a lot about, Peter Attia's Outlive book right now. He's by the way, he's a local doctor. This is a national #1 bestseller. We have mutual friends over here at Dell, but my point is a great book for those older. And so that's my recommendation of the day and what's on my mind. But I think your question was more towards what lifelong books would people want to read?
Yeah, I think it's a great answer, Jeremy. Yeah.
It's a good answer, and I'm listening to that book.
Oh,
I have it on Audible right now, listening to it. It's an eye opener.
It is, and he does a good job of going deep into the science of it in the beginning. But it really comes around, and even goes into great mental health things that we should all be conscious of. And so that's one of those practices that I try to give everybody. And that's a great Audible book, by the way. That one's good. And I'll give a plug for Michael's book. Play Nice But Win is a fantastic, understanding of how to build a company. And then I'd also say Elon's book is fantastic. The book that was just recently done and talks about how he's grown. Look, anybody who could grow 7 companies almost simultaneously at that rate and capture that much literally transformative, market dynamics, just an incredible read. It really is. Harvard Business Studies will be done on Jensen, Michael, and Elon for the rest of time. And we're fortunate to be a part of all 3 of those motions. And so I love all those books.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. This is a great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, John, for having me. Ethan, is always a pleasure. Love talking to you guys. I love what Eternal's doing. I cannot wait to see where your company's going to go.
Thank you. Talk
Thank
to you
you,
soon.
Jeremy.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.